Hey everyone, Road Breach here, and today we're taking a look at Sonic Prime. I was pretty worried that I wouldn't have something to post for Christmas, but here comes this little Netflix show for a new review subject that I can talk about. You know the drill by now, so without further ado, let's get this show on the road. The animation is great. The characters are very expressive, and the lighting really makes this show come to life. The character designs are what you'd expect when it comes to this franchise. Good old familiar Sonic character designs that we've seen for decades at this point, with the exception of Rouge's new costume. It's not a bad costume, it's a cool design, but she's not a spy in this show. Her old outfit may have been revealing, but it would have been perfect for the situation. It's more casual than this bodysuit she has in the cartoon. She doesn't work for Gun because Gun doesn't exist in this show. The outfit change was completely unnecessary in the context of the show, and was only done because they were offended by her outfit. Sorry for the tangent. The backgrounds look really good. Green Hill Zone looks perfect, New York City looks depressing and dystopian, and the jungle looks green and lush. The only thing that doesn't look the best are some of the effects that they use in this show that probably would have looked better if they were 2D, like the last cartoon I spoke about. There are better looking effects used in the show, it's just stuff like this doesn't really look that good. They also have these little flashback scenes that are animated to look like the Sega Genesis game, much like what they did in Mega Man Fully Charged, another 3D cartoon based on a video game. Speaking of which, they also use sound effects from the games, which is another fun bit of fan service that I'm sure fans will like. The voice acting is good too. With cartoony characters like this, I'd expect some good voice acting to accentuate the expressive animation, and the voice actors and actresses deliver that perfectly. Kazumi Evans was a good pick for Rouge.
I've been searching for years for a super rare and shiny gem called the Paradox Prism.
And the voice of Sonic, Devin Christian Mack, also voiced Dimlet in Transformers BotBots.
I can't believe that. Amy has to be in there.
You are saying a lot of words, and I know some of them, but I'm getting confused by words like mall and also think.
I'm definitely not opposed to having Transformers cameos in things that aren't Transformers. The action is awesome. The fight scenes are frenetic, fast-paced, well choreographed, and the cinematography helps give these scenes some visual interest. There are some fights where characters pull their punches, but most of the time when you see these rodents clash, it's gonna be a good time. I feel the need to emphasize just how good these fight scenes are, because when it comes to Netflix cartoons, I've seen how bad it can get with Bionicle. The fight scenes in Bionicle were basically just taking one shot and that's it. Boring as hell. This right here is why good fight scenes matter, because if you have shitty fight scenes, then you're gonna lose interest pretty quickly. The music is pretty good too. The background music when Sonic's getting chased by robots in New York City is my favorite track.
What's up with my shoes?
Now let's talk about the story. Eggman wants to use the Paradox Prism for his own use, but Sonic decides to do something drastic and spin dash the prism. But it wasn't the right choice to make because this ends up warping him into a parallel world where there's several Eggmen in control of Green Hill Zone, now New York City. And it's because of Sonic that the Egg Council now wants to conquer the Shatterverse. Like I said in my trailer analysis, this feels a lot like Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, my favorite PS5 game. Sonic's speed also acts as a battery for the prism. Because he smashed the prism, Sonic now has a link with the Paradox Prism shards, and when Sonic meets 9, New York City's version of Tails, he gives him this gear to stabilize the prism energy, which also lights up when it's close to the prism, and changes whenever he goes into a different reality, which happens every time Sonic touches the crystal. I was confused as to how they intend to bring the prism back together, because this all happened when Sonic smashed the prism, so it seems the overarching goal is to get the prism back together and thwart Eggman. But how do they intend to do that? Well, 9 uses the pieces to jump through the Shatterverse in one of his machines, so I think 9 could figure out how to do that. I also like that Sonic has something of a character arc. He starts off as oblivious, but ends up getting a better idea of sentimentality, and wanting to be a better friend because of it. Which I think is a good segue into the writing. The progression of events flows naturally from episode to episode, and pretty much every story beat doesn't feel contrived. But that's not to say all the writing on this show is good. One thing I take issue with is when Tails discovers that Eggman isn't in this robot and tries to tell Sonic about it. He doesn't elaborate that and just says it's a trap. Tails, use your words, buddy. Sonic isn't a psychic. I also feel like there are times when the characters are a little too chatty. It's not to the severity of what it's been described as in Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric, but this moment in the Egg Council's lab I could definitely do without. But there are moments that I like when Sonic says,
That's a Sonic Boom of a headache.
which I like to think is their way of slamming Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric. I also like that the code that Sonic uses to get into Tails' lab is the year that Sonic the Hedgehog 2 came out on Sega Genesis, which is considered to be one of the better Sonic Sega Genesis games. And if nothing else, shows that Sega does want to relate to the Sonic fan base. Another thing that I like is when Rouge is sleeping like a real bat in a couple of episodes. This show is also a big fan of cliffhangers. I'm not kidding when I say every episode ends with a cliffhanger.
And now for something completely different.
Let's talk about the characters. Sonic is the same fun-loving hedgehog with attitude he's always been. I like that he feels personally responsible for shattering the Paradox Prism and wanting to fix his mistake. Tails is the intelligent young fox that's friends with Sonic and fights with gadgets. Amy doesn't get much development in this first season, but she's still likable enough. Knuckles is a stern and serious warrior, Big is a big fat doofus, Shadow is a dark brooding loner, and Rouge is a flirtatious treasure hunter. It's already assumed that you're a fan of Sonic the Hedgehog and know these characters through fandom osmosis for some characters. I'm sure people will find this unacceptable, but this show was made for fans of Sonic the Hedgehog, so I can excuse this to an extent. The alternate versions of the characters we spend most of our time with are okay, with the best being Nine, who gets a good amount of screen time and a good backstory. Another thing that I like about Nine is that he's a reference to the Kitsune, or the nine-tailed fox in Japanese mythology, with his mechanical tails and his real ones. And like I mentioned, he finds a way to reality hop at will, so he's most likely going to be very important next season. Speaking of which, the season ends when Shadow stops Sonic in the rift between realities to fight him. Also, when Sonic smashed the prism, it seemed to send his friends into alternate realities as well. So this makes me wonder if that actually happened and if we're going to see where the other characters are in the Shatterverse. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see what they give us later down the pipeline. But overall, this show is pretty fun. Sonic Prime is a fun show with likable characters and fun action, and the overarching plot feels right at home with what you'd expect from the games. If you got Netflix and you love Sonic, you may like this show. That's all for now. Thanks for watching, and gotta zoom.